It's hard to believe I posted my first real movie review on my channel 9 years ago. Within that time, I hope I have grown as an artist and a YouTuber, though in recent years I have been floundering around. Pun unintended. Not sure what to do with my channel, getting too many ideas and not making much progress on any projects, letting them sink into the depths never to be seen again, and by extension letting collaborations fall to the wayside, letting said collaborators down. The timing of Ariel falling off the rock was purely coincidental, a happy accident during the editing process. I refer to these moments as Bob Ross moments. Because after all, if you have many projects in progress, you're actually making no progress at all. My motto, stay creative, is a motto I need to stick by and not just be something I use to end my videos on. The phrase doesn't mean to literally be creative all the time. What the phrase means is to have the willingness to be creative with everything you do. At least that's what it means to me. Walt Disney himself was a man that took creativity so seriously that it was what drove him to keep going. Around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. That's probably one of his most famous quotes right there. Yeah, it is important to try new things, but it's also important to look back at what you've done so you can move forward. Just don't look backwards for too long. After all, in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you've been. Thank you, Maui, for the words of wisdom. So with that said, I have decided to take a look back at my old content, starting with the very first real review I posted on my channel, and do a sort of retrospective. A re-examination of how I approach making videos, how I approached this movie when I made that review, and go into more detail about my own personal experiences with this movie, instead of just spouting off a lot of stuff that most people would either already know or just look up online themselves. As for the sequels, well, the one sequel and one prequel, I will bring them up in this video, but I don't intend to make videos devoted to them separately, since the first sequel is just plain lazy in the sense it's more or less the same story as the first movie. I did mention this in my video about why Ursula deserves her own movie. I bring up how Morgana retconned the whole fan theory of Ursula and Triton being siblings. There was even a deleted song that went into more detail about Morgana and Ursula's relationship, which really shouldn't have been cut from the movie. It is suggested in a deleted scene of The Little Mermaid that Triton and Ursula were siblings.
There's a whole world of mer people under the sea.
King Triton's their ruler.
He's got 7 fair daughters.
And a witch of a sister named Ursula.
Though I'm not sure what more could be said about Ursula that can't be explained away by watching the deleted scenes from the animated movie, which does explain her backstory, or by watching the 3 episodes of the Little Mermaid TV series Ursula appears in. As for the second sequel, or prequel, which shows how Ariel's mother died and how music was banned, it was interesting until Ariel fought hard to get music back in their lives after it was banned, only to not show up for a concert at the start of the 1989 movie because she just forgot. Wow, this prequel was utterly pointless. Well, not entirely. It gave her sisters personalities. You know, the sisters who we barely see in the first movie. But then it also had Flounder naming a swimming move after a corkscrew.
Corkscrew!
How the hell do you know what a corkscrew is? First movie, a seagull called a fork a dinglehopper, and you took him at his word. Don't even get me started on the villain in this movie. I can't even remember her name at this point, but
It's Marina Del Rey!
yeah, nobody cares. Never mind how pathetic a villain she is in comparison to Ursula. I know Ariel refers to her as the governess, but to me she's basically a swimming alarm clock. 'Cause all she does is she wakes up the princesses. That's it. What else? I really don't know. I mean, traditionally speaking, a governess is a woman that is employed to teach children in a private household, but there isn't any scene in this film or in the prelogue showing this woman teaching the princesses anything. I'm guessing she's taught them how to be ladylike in public or something. I don't know, but to me, if you're not going to show what this character does, how are we supposed to relate to her frustration of being in a dead-end job? I really hate to bring up Hades again, Wait, who am I kidding? No, I don't. We feel for his situation because he is forced into a job he hates. He's literally in a dead-end job. But we see the job that he does and how tedious it is. We don't see that here. Okay, she straight up says that she hates her job.
I hate this job.
All we see is her jealous of Sebastian's job. That's it. But even when she does get Sebastian's job, she doesn't do anything other than, you know, practically peacocks herself in front of Triton and doesn't actually do anything other than just yap his ear off.
Benjamin, if we're late again, I'll never get a promotion. Not that I want a promotion. No, no, no. I love this job. I hate this job.
Subtle. Hades never says straight out that he hates his job. He says that he has a full-time gig that Zeus charitably bestowed on him. Sarcastically. Why? Well, maybe because he didn't want to give away that he's trying to overthrow Zeus. You know, like she's trying to do with Sebastian. Not being subtle about her goal at all. But one of the most distracting things is that sometimes this film forgets it's set underwater. There's a scene where she's getting a manicure and is told to dip her nails.
Maybe I'm just too sensitive.
Dip.
You're already underwater! How can you dip your nails in a bowl when you're already underwater? Oh, and another scene where she's told to take a nice relaxing bath.
I haven't worked my tail off for the last 12 hours just to have it snatched away.
How about a nice relaxing bath?
Hi, you're underwater? You're already in a giant bath? And yes, I did notice that one of the outfits she wears in the movies is basically Mary Sue's color scheme.
And it is the best color scheme ever.
As you can see, I'm a self-starter, Your Majesty.
Okay, that part made me laugh.
Do the corkscrew!
Bring out all of your utensils!
How do you know what utensils are? You know what? Why am I getting hung up on this? I'm giving this movie way more attention than it really needs. I mean, almost 7 minutes in and I haven't even started talking about The Little Mermaid, the movie itself yet. I've been hung up on the prequel for so long. Let's get back on track here. God, it hurts to look at that thumbnail now. Oh, that's better. I mean, a little better.
It is the best thumbnail ever.
You're not going to sing Part of Your World, are you?
Under the sea, wish I could be part of your videos more because I've hardly ever read them anymore.
Looking back at my original video I made for this film, which was my first real movie review I ever made and uploaded to my channel, I was admittedly overly and needlessly aggressive toward it. Probably because back then, most reviewers had an aggressive streak to them, ranting about a movie, reacting to clips in an angry way to fulfill some sort of masochistic need to just make a joke out of how much they hated a movie and how it was torture for them to watch. But they're being tortured by the film so that we don't have to. Many reviewers were heavily influenced by YouTubers like the Nostalgia Critic back then, and I thought in order to be noticed, I needed to be like that too. But honestly, I would probably be like that anyway. Not because I am angry or that I hate this film, but because I am fiercely protective and compassionate about the things I love. And yeah, that can come across as aggression. But I also discovered reviewers who had a calmer approach to their writing and editing and realised I didn't need to be a certain way that didn't feel natural to me to be noticed. I could just be me. Funny how many of my older videos kind of had that tone about them. That, and I really had no idea what I was doing back then. I mean, I had a cheap mic, I had no clue what aspect ratios were. You know, exhibit A, look how this changes from widescreen right back to like 16. Oh my lordy, what was I doing? And there's long silent gaps here and there throughout the video where I didn't edit out pauses or breaths or anything. I had very little confidence and it was obvious in my delivery with recording the script, which was written in a very straight to the point textbook kind of way, that I was just looking up information and putting it into a script without imbuing it with my own personal experience that I had with the movie myself. But we all have to start somewhere, and I am a firm believer in that it's not about the equipment, it's about commitment. I mean, I started making videos with Windows Movie Maker of all things. Start small, use what you've got. That's not to say being a YouTuber is easy. If it was, everyone would be doing it. Rewatching the movie recently, I want to talk about my personal experience with this movie and why I feel about it the way I do, and maybe reveal to you that my feelings have changed. Dive deeper into this story, and it is one of Disney's most clever, insightful, emotional movies with a bittersweet ending. One of the first Disney movies to do so. It also arguably has one of the best Disney villains out of all the Disney movies put together. Apart from Hades. Hades is awesome. Yeah, I always find a way to squeeze a Hercules reference in my videos. At least I can use the excuse that both movies have the same directors. I don't have a problem, leave me alone. The Little Mermaid was the movie I cut my editing teeth on, and I am still gnawing away at that bone because I never really cared for this movie, and to this day, it just doesn't have the same effect on me as it did on other people my age who saw it then when it was first released. Okay, my feelings about the movie when I first watched it till now has changed, but there's a lot more meat on the bone and a lot to chew over here. I don't hate the movie itself. I think it's more the fact that it is seen as a groundbreaking animated movie, and in some ways it is, but it also overshadows movies that were far more groundbreaking when it came to presenting new and innovative animation techniques. The Little Mermaid had more commercial appeal and was more groundbreaking in how it used music to tell the story, not just to draw out the runtime. Musical numbers in a movie, whether they be animated or live action, in my opinion should be used to move the story along or allow time for a character to convey the emotional beats of the movie and allow time for the audience to invest into the character, which to me The Little Mermaid did perfectly. You probably all know that the song Part of Your World almost ended up on the cutting room floor. Without this song, we wouldn't have the emotional investment into Ariel that we would have throughout the movie. But I think the movie's success is more to do with how it took Disney back to its roots, reviving the old ways instead of swimming around blindly. Some see it as a romantic comedy, which is how it was marketed at the time, but at the heart to me, and as I said in my original video, this is a father-daughter story. A girl becoming a woman, finding her own way in the world, stepping out of the safety of her parents' guidance into the excitement of the mysterious world of humans. Not only is she in love with humans as a species, she falls for Prince Eric by extension. Although I can't understand why. Eric's priorities are all over the place. Remember when he almost died after the shipwreck and he awakens in a hazy state while she sings to him? His first priority when reaching a full level of consciousness is find out who the hot singing chick is, not about if the rest of his crew are okay. You know, including Grimm, who runs toward him after thinking that he was dead, and Eric doesn't really seem to care. Yes, he drank too much seawater. Yeah, let's go with that. I mean, his dog Max has more personality than Eric does. But what would we be willing to give or pay to have our dreams come true? Ariel sacrifices a lot to make her dream a reality, and to some, this makes Ariel an inspirational role model, taking a chance to live her own life independent of her family. But in other ways, she literally gives up everything she knows and loves for a guy she hadn't even spoken to yet. That's not inspirational to me. In fact, as a kid, I thought Ariel was being selfish for what she did. In fact, I made a point of bringing this up in my video about parasocial relationships between YouTubers and their fans, using Ariel's so-called relationship with Eric as an example. She falls in love with a man she's never spoken to before, and someone who doesn't even know of her existence. It is the perfect example of a parasocial relationship. Also, why does Eric's statue float? But she never had the means to do any of this until Ursula the Sea Witch took advantage of her naivety. That doesn't make it okay, but it does make us wonder if we would turn away such an opportunity if something like this arose. The Little Mermaid shored up Disney's legacy in the late 1980s, opening the floodgates for the Disney Renaissance, and I would say this was the final push those huge gates needed, but I don't think it could have done this without movies like Oliver and Company or Basil the Great Mouse Detective getting their foot in the door first, even if it was one toe at a time. Either way, you can't deny The Little Mermaid made some waves and is somehow still relevant. I mean, toys are still being made based on this movie. It had the added pressure of living up to the expected standards set by other Disney movies of a similar tone, like Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, etc. The latter of which is another movie I did not see until I was a teenager. I really need to make a video on that movie. The Little Mermaid was not a Disney movie I grew up with. Wait, is that a P? In fact, I didn't see this movie from start to finish in one sitting until I was in my early 20s. See, when I was a kid, Many movies were banned in my household, especially if they had witchcraft in them, which is a majority of Disney movies. So obviously a movie with a literal sea witch in it is also going to be forbidden. This meant I never saw many iconic movies from Disney or other studios at the time until I was much older, but I never had an interest in seeing The Little Mermaid as a kid. I was 3 years old when this movie was released, and I was more obsessed with Oliver and Company or Basil the Great Mouse Detective, All Dogs Go to Heaven and Land Before Time, etc. Looking back, I was exposed to movies, live action or animated, that were grounded more in reality than fantasy, with very few exceptions. The biggest exception is probably All Dogs Go to Heaven, but to be honest with you, the scene where Charlie is having a nightmare about hell was often fast forwarded through. All Dogs Go to Heaven was incidentally released the same week as The Little Mermaid. I poured myself over these movies to the point of knowing them word for word, but somehow The Little Mermaid was left on the side and never earned that attention. So I felt when I started my YouTube channel that it was only right to have this movie be my very first movie review, since it was a movie that I didn't necessarily avoid, but one that I just didn't really give the same amount of attention to. So it was easier for me to cut my teeth on this because I didn't have as much of an emotional attachment to this movie as I did with other Disney movies. The Little Mermaid is not groundbreaking to me in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of firsts when it comes to the animation industry as a medium, but rather more lasts. The Little Mermaid gave Disney CPR after almost drowning, overshadowed by the live action movies Disney was producing at the time, one of which was also a mermaid movie, which I've never seen, by the way, and don't really intend to. Why don't I really find mermaids all that appealing? That's weird. The movie that really started the Disney Renaissance to me was another movie that happened to have a redhead in it, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, as there were far more groundbreaking animation techniques used in that movie than there were in The Little Mermaid, which had no new techniques in it really. The underwater segments in Fantasia and Pinocchio were in no doubt ways to get to the point to be able to convey underwater scenes in a believable way without it distracting from the story. Could you imagine what The Little Mermaid underwater scenes would have looked like if they used the same ripple effects and bubble effects that they did during the underwater scene in Pinocchio? Oh my god, that would have been so migraine inducing. When it comes to animation as a medium, there is nothing in this movie that hasn't been done before. Though it is the first fairy tale movie from Disney since the release of Sleeping Beauty in 1959, it was the last Disney traditional cel animated feature film before the digital method CAPS was introduced in their next film, The Rescuers Down Under, eliminating the need for cels and the multiplane camera and many of the optical effects used for the last time in The Little Mermaid, at least by the Disney company anyway. Only one scene in the film used caps, and that was the final scene of the wedding ship sailing away under a rainbow. Movies that came before this, Basil the Great Mouse Detective for instance, or The Black Cauldron, which to my memory was the first Disney movie to use CGI. I believe the first animated movie to use CGI was actually Rock and Roll, but I might be wrong about that. Computer-generated imagery was used to create some of the wrecked ships in the final battle, a staircase behind a shot of Ariel in Eric's castle, and the carriage Eric and Ariel are riding in when she bounces it over a ravine. There was background planes as well during the scene when Ursula grows big, which is probably the worst effect in the movie in my opinion. So to me, The Little Mermaid is more of a transitional film between the golden era and the Disney Renaissance, rather than the one that literally started it. Though The Little Mermaid did bring Broadway to cartoons, making it a groundbreaking musical rather than a groundbreaking animated movie. It is an important film in the animation industry because it's not seen as an animated movie, it's seen as a musical. The fact that the film is in the animation medium doesn't even come into that. But it was instrumental in re-establishing feature-length animation as the forefront of Disney's legacy. Ariel herself is a fiery redhead who rebels against her father's wishes and chases after her dream, her red hair being a very conscious decision to make her stand apart from the other Disney princesses at the time, representing her fiery passion for life. Geez, some traditions never die, do they? Her design is very appealing and familiar, expressing herself in a much more realistic way for a teenager, instead of being all delicate ballet fingered like previous Disney heroines before her, like Alice, who's technically not a Disney princess, or Snow White, who started it all allegedly, or Aurora, who slept through half of her movie, or Cinderella, who is probably one of my favorite Disney princesses because she suffered in silence, and I really should, you know, make a video about that. She's a self-conscious, awkward klutz when in the human world, and a forgetful rebel when in the ocean. Ironically, Ariel is more appealing to me after she trades her voice in for a pair of human legs. That's right, Ariel is more appealing to me when she doesn't talk. Character animation is about exaggerating body language and expression, and pantomime characters are some of the most appealing characters in the history of cinema, never mind the history of animation. The loss of her voice is never seen as a disability, but instead an obstacle for her to overcome. At just 16 years old, God, really? 16? Go. I feel old. Ariel is at a point in her life where she's no longer a child in her own eyes, but isn't quite an adult yet. She's still figuring out what she wants and who she is, and to me, I just didn't find her appealing when I watched the movie in my early 20s. Rewatching it now though, I feel more drawn to King Triton because I see a lot of my dad in him, who was trying to keep her safe, and also drawn to Ursula, who oozes confidence and easily manipulates Ariel, taking advantage of her naivety. In order to avoid repeating myself here, I already made a video about Ursula and how she psychologically manipulates Ariel in this movie, so I'm just going to put segments of that video in this one. Disney villains have always had a history of being far more entertaining and interesting than the main characters of the story, mainly because most of the time their backstories are shrouded in mystery or explained away in a throwaway comment, allowing fans to basically make up their own ideas of their backstory. Ursula was a fish out of water. At one point in the movie, she literally was. For me personally, villains, antagonists, obstacles, flaws, whatever you want to refer to them as, are the driving force behind the plot of the story they are in. Without Ursula, would Ariel have had the balls to leave her family to be with Prince Eric if Ursula had not made her the offer to sign away her soul in exchange for human legs? In the original Hans Christian Andersen tale, the Sea Witch played a very minor part, but it was Disney that expanded this character into an antagonist. Ursula embraces the label Sea Witch. In the song Poor Unfortunate Souls, she admits that she was a nasty person in the past and how she has come to see the light. An outright lie, of course, but it does tell us one thing: she was shunned because of her talent for magic. A villain will often portray themselves as blameless, or convince the protagonists that they are the victim, or the cliche, "We're not so different, you and I." A villain becomes one because of a choice they make, though with Disney they tend to showcase anyone who isn't what society sees as beautiful or accepted. Ursula is a larger woman, but is never ashamed of her size. If anything, she's proud of it. And frankly, she shouldn't be ashamed of her size. She is Disney's only plus-size style icon. This, to me, is a very attractive quality. She is comfortable in her own skin, and quite rightly so. She is a beautiful character. She presents herself in a very attractive and sexual way, using body language as a way to both entice and to intimidate. Ariel is a young, naive, innocent girl who is on the cusp of womanhood. She isn't aware of how beautiful she is yet, or how to be confident in her own skin. So seeing a woman like Ursula seem so confident in herself would be a quality Ariel would want to adopt. Ariel is not forced into doing anything, but is manipulated psychologically into signing the contract. The character of Ursula is inspired in both appearance and demeanor by the drag legend Divine. The power of drag is all about performance, presence, activism, resistance, and of course self-expression. When Ariel first enters Ursula's lair, the first thing that Ursula does is she styles her hair and does her makeup. This can be seen as simply an act of vanity, but what Ursula is really doing here is empowering herself. That's what makeup does. It's not about hiding flaws, it's about preparing for war, while also disarming Ariel. But Ursula's real target wasn't Ariel herself. Ursula used Ariel to get to Triton. You could also say Ursula presents herself as the wise old folk facade, a trope used before in Disney from the very beginning.
Come in, my child. My dear, sweet child. Unfortunate merfolk like yourself. The child
She relies on diminishing her target, making them feel vulnerable by referring to them as my dear child. She adopts a grandmotherly type tone when talking to Ariel. I think this would have been far more creepy if we knew that Ursula was Ariel's aunt, and maybe Ariel wasn't aware of this at all, and maybe this was revealed to her later in the movie by her father. I don't know. It would have been far more interesting. But then again, depicting aunts and uncles as villains is something that Disney decided to do later on, especially with The Lion King. Talk about a monkey's uncle. Ursula is what's known as a bad Samaritan. She takes people in and seems to want to help them at first, but it's all for personal gain. But what was her goal of adding to her little garden? Were these poor unfortunate souls the merfolk that shunned her, and this is her way of getting revenge? Or were they just random victims? She wears a mask of altruism, pretending her goal is to help the unfortunate, or at least those she considers less fortunate than herself. She offers Ariel help so she can not only find her prince, but also be part of the human world, which is something Ursula is fully aware that Ariel wants. Ursula takes advantage of Ariel's wants, and she doesn't straight out say she could turn her human. She waits until Ariel asks her, "You can do that?" And then she knows she's got her. And the audience is reminded of the fact that she's taking advantage of Ariel by an evil smirk. It's pretty much the equivalent of a classic villain twirling their moustache. To me, a villain needs to be interesting, entertaining, and fun to watch. Ursula is sadistic, vengeful, and opportunistic. Though she is all of these things and more, there is a sophistication to her theatrics which is backed up by her ingenious design, her animation, and her voice acting. Though she is intelligent, she is also arrogant, egotistical, and vain. Her weakness is her hunger for power. Ursula asked Ariel for her voice, the one thing that Eric was haunted by after Ariel saved him from drowning. And Ursula knew this, and uses this to her advantage. To me, maybe Eric is just seen as the prize at the end that Ariel has to battle for, but Ariel is the key to Triton's undoing. And even the villain of this movie knows this is a father-daughter story. And life's full of tough choices, isn't it? Ariel and Eric are just pawns to her. Triton is the real prize she's after. Ursula never forces Ariel to do anything. It's always by her own choice. She was never forced to sign her soul away. She did it of her own accord, much to the shock of her friends, who could only look on in horror. Ursula was originally written with Bea Arthur, or Dorothy from one of my favourite sitcoms, Golden Girls. Even though she was never cast, Bea Arthur has the air and presence of a Disney villain to me, and is something I would have loved to have seen, but she has more of a Maleficent vibe to me. Ursula is far more loud and in your face and flamboyant. Still, it does make me wonder what sort of film we would have gotten if Bea Arthur played Ursula.
You know about the will. You know if I die, you'll be on easy street. What did you do, Dorothy? Slip cyanide into my mouthwash? Ha ha, the joke's on you, I don't use it.
Oh, Ma, come on, you're just being silly. Here, have some tea. It'll relax you.
Here's a molar. Buy yourself something pretty.
Let me make you a cup of tea.
I thought you were gonna stab Stan.
Don't be ridiculous. I mean, do you honestly believe that I would stab Stan at my own daughter's wedding? Well, of course not. I would wait until after the wedding. There are too many witnesses. Kidding.
Also, Bea Arthur is my spirit animal. Now that I think about it, my love for villains in particular was one of my biggest motivations in starting my channel. Most of my favourite characters are villains, and The Little Mermaid has a pretty nasty one. Though my biggest gripe with Ursula is when she is overcome with rage after her minions are killed. I mean, understandably so, Ariel basically just killed her beloved pets. She aims the trident at Eric, and Ariel saves him by grabbing Ursula's hair, forcing her to redirect the trident's magic to her minions and killing them in the process. She blames Ariel for this accident and changes into a giant kraken. She has nothing left to lose, so her last resort is to literally become a kaiju. Harkens back to when Maleficent turned into a huge dragon to stop Philip reaching Aurora. But it isn't Ariel who defeats Ursula, it's Eric. Wow, hey, look at that! He actually did did something! But in saving Ariel, he also proves to Triton that he does truly love her and will do anything to be with her. Also, the fact that Triton is, you know, unable to do anything about this, Eric has to step in. I talk about this in my original videos, so forgive me for repeating myself, but I can't help it. The real conflict of the movie is not between Ursula and Ariel, but between Ursula and Triton. Ariel was simply a pawn in Ursula's plan to overthrow Triton. After wrecking Ariel's cove full of human treasures, which is the equivalent of a parent going into a kid's room and tearing their posters off the wall, he immediately regrets his actions. Triton has to be Ariel's father as well as her king. He has his kingdom to protect as well as his family, and Ariel's obsession with humanity puts his kingdom in jeopardy. To me, Triton is the most interesting character in the movie other than Ursula, and deserved far more screen time than he actually got. He had to overcome his hatred and prejudice towards humans so he could let Ariel go and be with Eric. Eric, who by the way is quite possibly the most boring Disney character ever, and I just still do not understand why Ariel fell for him. So after Ursula becomes calamari, Ariel and Eric are still apart as conveyed here. Ariel is resting on a rock in the ocean staring longingly at Eric, who is on the sand. They are meters apart here, but Triton can clearly see it doesn't matter how much distance is between them, whether it be a few meters or a few hundred or 1,000 miles. Either way, they still can't be together until he makes a decision himself. I recently moved from Scotland to America to start a new life, and upon rewatching the movie, I felt like I had a lot more in common with Ariel than I realized. Okay, I didn't sell my soul or anything, but I did make a huge life-changing decision, which was difficult for my family and friends to accept, but luckily were fully supportive of. Leaving my family, especially my parents, was the hardest part of the move, so when Ariel says her final goodbyes to Triton at the end, I did have more of an emotional response to this movie than I did before. Her father Triton, a proud and overprotective father and king, wants to keep his headstrong youngest daughter safe in the ocean, but he also has a tender side. He has to come to terms with the fact Ariel needs to leave home to live her own life, and also get over his own prejudices against humans, and eventually let her go. I couldn't help but see my own father in Triton, and how hard it must have been for him for me to leave home, and to move to the other side of the planet. We are literally oceans apart. Triton makes his own decision after seeing Ariel really does love Eric, and with his own magic, turns her human. Makes me wonder. It's a bit of a Glinda moment here. Oh, don't worry, I had the power all along. Has he used this power before? Well, this goes into fan theory territory, but hear me out here. If it was shown in this movie that Ariel's mother Athena was killed by humans and only Triton knew, it would better explain his hatred for them. But this is Ariel's story and not Triton's. Ariel doesn't understand why her father hates humans and the surface world. She doesn't see how people who make such wonderful things could be bad. But the ever fun-loving, curious Ariel goes off swimming around in shipwrecks and discovers dingle hoppers and snarfblats and corkscrews that they happen to know the name of. Nah, never mind, I'm not going down that road again. It's another reason why I despise the prequel, because Ariel, when she's a kid, sees a ship right before her mother is killed. Okay, so when she's 16, why does she have such curiosity and wonderment of seeing Eric's ship? Would she have the same wonderment if she had seen a ship before, especially when she last saw it? Her mother was killed shortly after. Why did the prequel show her being scared of this ship? Also, another question, why does Eric's statue float? The great thing about Disney movies is their rewatch value, and how over time, even a movie that you didn't get emotionally invested in when you first watched it can have an entirely new meaning when watching it with new eyes. The Little Mermaid has a new meaning to me now. It's still not one of my favourites, but rewatching the movie and rewatching my first review I ever made on my channel for it did make me appreciate it more, as well as allowing me to dive into various themes and topics related to it, or ones that I just happened to drift toward while making this video. So, what do you think of this new format? Do you think I should revisit my old videos more like I did with this one? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Munchkin. Stay creative.